Welcome, everyone, to the Green Lake Church Fall Lecture Series. Glad to have those of you that can make it in person and those watching online. We are excited for these presentations with Dr. Herr this weekend. Dr. Herr graduated from Andrews University in 1970 with a religious studies degree. Siegfried Horn was instrumental in getting him accepted into a PhD program in the Department of Near Eastern Literature and Civilizations at Harvard University, where he graduated in 1977. He first taught in the Philippines and then at Burman University in Canada, where he is now Professor Emeritus of Religious Studies. It is a privilege to have you with us this weekend, and we look forward to walking through the Bible land and learning how archaeology interacts with the Bible as we know it today. So the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Pastor Kevin. I love archaeology. Yeah. I love anything that's old. My wife especially likes that. That's a joke that Agatha Christie is supposed to have said because her husband was 13 years older. No, she was 13 years older than her husband, and he was an archaeologist in Iraq. Well, I've been on something like 25 or 30 archaeological excavations. I've directed most of them along with my almost twin brother, Doug Clark, who was at Walla Walla for several years as a professor, and now at Caesarea University, where he goes every now and then. He's retired. But he and I have worked together for a long time. Also, Larry Garrity I've worked with over 50 years. Who is also at Caesarea University. I look at this picture of Masada that's on the screen here, and that's something that Gumi put up, and I want to acknowledge Gumi's work and helpfulness with me on this. This is all Herod the Great right here, and we're going to talk about Herod tonight. Herod doesn't have a good reputation in the Bible, you know? But he was, on the other hand, well, he was paranoid, he was angry, so angry he assassinated, that's not the right word. He killed a couple of his sons and one of his wives. This is not a decent fellow. But at the same time, he was the greatest builder Palestine has ever seen. He had friends in high places. Caesar Augustus was his friend when he spent time in Rome before he became a king here in Judah. He was desperately afraid of Queen Cleopatra of Egypt because she was threatening to take him over. Yeah, Mark Antony against Octavian, that whole stuff in Rome. Well, Herod was on Octavian's side, right? Octavian became Caesar Augustus, and Mark Antony was over on the other side. So he and Cleopatra, Herod the Great with Octavian. Octavian won out, of course, and so Herod had a long reign, about 40 years. Let's start the PowerPoint program, if we can, here. Herod had these two sides to him. He also had bad health, and at every one of his palaces, and he built about 7 or 8 palaces in the Israel area. At every one of them are large swimming pools. He liked to bask in the chemicals of various hot springs and all of that. So tonight, we're going to talk about the greatest builder in the history of the Holy Land. So great that we even call the transition, Herod the Great's reign, plus those of his children that went into the AD period up until the time of Paul. We call that the Herodian period. We name it after him because his influence was so great. And I have a slide changer here in my pocket. He's known best, of course, for this terrible deed he did when the wise men came and asked him where the new king of the Jews was and was to be born. And of course, he sent his soldiers down to Bethlehem because that's where they were at. Here's the demon whispering into Herod's ear. And so he sends the soldiers out to murder the young children under the age of 2, I believe it was. This is on the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, this sculpture. And they make all the people look like they're medieval period here. I punched the wrong button. This, of course, is Joseph and Mary with Jesus ahead of the bad action that's going on here. Mary's riding on the donkey, but Joseph is dressed as a pilgrim. I'm going to start with one of his palaces on the other side of the Jordan River, on the east side. In many of the pictures where I first show an ancient site, I've got a map here. And on the map, I have a mark, a yellow X. That's where that site is located. Okay, so you can sort of see if you're up close enough or if the camera can focus in there what it is, where it is. This was an original hill. You can see bedrock at various places here. And Herod heightened it by bringing in other materials, building what looks almost like a volcano, right? And at the very top, his palace. If you look closely, you can see up here some pillars. Okay, we're going to see those pillars a little bit later. But down here at the bottom, you see the foundations of what was an ancient aqueduct, a high aqueduct that brought water over to Herod's palace. But that's just the bottom part of it left there today. All of this here is a modern access going up to the top. At the top, you can look westward to the Dead Sea and the wilderness of Judah beyond. Many times in the writing at the bottom of the page, you'll see a date. That date is usually when the picture was taken. I took that in 1984 when the Dead Sea was still fairly high. The Dead Sea has gone down. Because most of the water that used to flow into it is now no longer flowing into it. It's being used for agriculture. And so today, at the very top, people have reconstructed the pillars of Herod's throne room in his palace. And so when our dig visits this site, it's well known because it was the place where John the Baptist was imprisoned by the Herodian descendant of Herod the Great. Okay? Remember, John the Baptist was saying, the marriage you made with the daughter of Aretas IV of the Petra is all wrong because she was divorced. Right? And so they imprisoned John the Baptist. And here is where we had that famous dance by Salome. And so, of course, our archaeological people have to dance there. And, of course, we have to record it. And who's recording it? Do you recognize this person? That's Dana Waters, my sister-in-law. Could she have done something like that? She was having fun, of course, as these young college girls were doing. They're all from Andrews University, by the way. Nobody from Walla Walla would do that kind of thing. But poor John the Baptist got his head separated from his body. Yeah, I've already mentioned Cleopatra. She was actually Cleopatra the 7th. People at this time like to name each other after their fathers or grandfathers or something. It's called paponymy or something like that, where you name children after ancestors. So she's Cleopatra the Seventh. She was supposed to be beautiful. I don't see it in either of these pictures right here, but she apparently was very wealthy, wielded a lot of power, and maybe that was beautiful to Mark Antony and, well, to Julius Caesar first, and then to Mark Antony. Okay, another one of the palaces that Herod built was here at Masada. You can see the flat top of the rock right here. Masada was the picture that was there originally at the beginning of this. Masada located right here along the Dead Sea again. Machaerus, where John the Baptist was beheaded, was about there. Masada right here. And it overlooks the Dead Sea and this peninsula shaped like an elbow and therefore called Lisan Peninsula because Arabic word for elbow is Lisan. So, yeah, we see the wilderness of Judah up here and the site of En Gedi, which is a spring and is where David was hiding in a cave from Saul. And David's men wanted him to go over there and kill Saul, of course, because Saul was trying to get David. But David wouldn't kill the Lord's anointed, right? And that was a very smart thing for him to do. But Masada will be the next place that we look at. And if you go to Masada today, you will usually go from about here to the top by a gondola. So it's real easy. When I was there in 1970, and I took this picture with this acacia tree in front of it. Masada is this gorgeous cliff face thing all the way around. But do you see there's a trail that snakes its way up this. It's called the Snake Trail. I stayed at the youth hostel at the bottom of the site, and they woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we climbed that snake trail to the very top just at dawn. And we'll see a picture of what it looked like at dawn. But I have several pictures also from aerial views right here. Herod's palace was built on this promontory. It looks like a boat, kind of. There's an upper palace, a middle palace, and a lower palace right there. This is the snake trail that you see going down here where C is. E are the storerooms. A is the palace. D is the wall that went around the edge of the site, all the way around, built later by the Jewish people who were fighting Rome at the time, later than Herod the Great, about a century later. And that wall was built in two parallel walls with cross walls. That's called a casemate wall right here. We'll see casemate walls tomorrow morning during Sabbath school when we're looking at the building of King Solomon. There was also a central palace right here. There was a swimming pool down here. This was part of another central palace. Herod's building was incredible here. Yet there's no evidence that he ever lived there. He just had these places he could run and hide to. He was afraid of Cleopatra, like I said. And this was one place he could find that was really defensible. Look at the cliffs going all the way around. The only area that is broken where that is was a ramp built by the Romans when they laid siege to this site. After Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, Jews fled to Masada, almost several hundred of them, and the Romans wanted to put down this revolt, and so in 73 AD they built that ramp and finally conquered the Zealots who were there at Masada. Here's a closer picture of these 3 levels of palace. The big palace up here with the storerooms, then a small center palace, and a lower sort of courtyard palace with pillars and all of that. Let's go on. And this is when I arrived at the top and went down to that lower palace. with a sunrise over the Dead Sea from the lower palace with the pillars in the foreground. And the Dead Sea is now much lower than it is. This is part of the Lisan Peninsula. It no longer exists, actually. It's all solid ground all the way across right now. Unfortunately, the Dead Sea is becoming deader and deader. They're talking about taking water from the Mediterranean or from the Red Sea and bringing water to replenish what is being lost by evaporation. It's so hot down there at the Dead Sea, 1,200, 1,300 feet now below sea level, that the evaporation is intense. But the evaporation creates rain in the region. And so if you don't have that evaporation, if the Dead Sea gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it will change the climate of the region, unfortunately. So they're talking about importing water. The Med-Dead Canal bringing water from the Mediterranean, and the Red-Dead Canal bringing water from the Red Sea. But there's problems because little life forms come in with that water too, although the Dead Sea can't have life in it. It's just too salty. It's a great place to read a newspaper, the Dead Sea. Go out and float, read your newspaper. Yeah. In order for Herod to live here, or anybody to live there, they needed water. And there are storms that come in this region, strong storms. And these storms can channel water down to these. There are several openings. You see an opening here, here, and several of them all along here, all on this one level. Those are the openings to cisterns. Okay? And look at this picture here. This is an average cistern. This is a person right here. You can see the walls all plastered so that the water won't leak out into the limestone surrounding it. But it is huge. It's like a major house. One of those. And there were many of them. And the archaeologists who excavated said that there was a storm that came one time while they were there, and that one storm filled almost all of these cisterns by channeling the water from the top and running along canals and channels, filling each one of these that are there. Okay, after Herod, when the Zealots were rebelling against the Romans after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. They came here, and of course, that's when the Romans built this. I want to spend a little bit of time on this because the story of Masada is not finished until you talk about the destruction of it. Yes, it's after the time of Herod, but not much after it. AD 73, as you can see there. Another picture shows Roman forts. Look at this huge Roman fort here with a smaller one in there. Another one here. Another one down here. There were 7 or 8 of these Roman encampments that surrounded the site. Remember, there were only a few hundred people on Masada at the time, and yet you have, looks like thousands of Roman soldiers surrounding this and besieging it and not letting any of the Jewish zealots escape. In fact, they built, do you see along here, do you see a wall line here? And that wall line actually continued over here. It went up and it was over here as well. All around the site. The wall comes along here and goes up to the top of the cliff and goes along like this and on. That was a wall intended to keep the Jewish zealots in. Keep them, make them hungry. They still had food when this place was finally conquered, and the water was available to them. The Romans had siege machines in which they tossed these rocks. And my son here in 1989, he would have been 8 years old, was standing on one of them. But here's the siege ramp and the Roman soldiers going up it. They built this siege tower from where they threw these stones. And gradually, over time, and a battering ram, a huge battering ram like this, ramming the wall. Over time, they began to be successful, even though the Jewish zealots, who are pictured here throwing the stones back down on the Roman attackers, but they had filled the casemate wall with rubble. And so the wall was really thick, okay? It was a maximum, it was like, 25, 30 feet thick. And so it was not an easy matter about doing this, but the Romans were finally victorious, and but before the Romans were victorious, according to the Jewish historian Josephus, the Jews made a pact that they would kill each other. And there was not a single Jewish zealot left alive for the Romans to enslave. They would rather die than become enslaved. So that's the end of the story of Masada. Another palace that Herod built, again, like the one across the Dead Sea over in Jordan, Machaerus, this is called Herodium, named after Herod. You can see it really looks like a volcano here. From the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, you can see Herodium in the distance, and it really looks like a volcano. In fact, it's open at the top. We'll see what's in that crater in a little bit. But the lower area was a huge palace area built by Herod, all for himself. A huge swimming pool here with a monumental centerpiece, colonnades all around it. There was a hippodrome right here where B is a hippodrome, is a place for horses to race or chariots. Just think Ben-Hur, okay? Yeah, the chariot race in the famous movie, very Christian movie, Ben-Hur. We also think they have found his burial place right here where E is marked. Josephus tells us that Herod built his tomb here at Herodium. It's not far from Bethlehem, actually. In fact, we're looking over into the Dead Sea area right here. Okay, and his main palace was all along here. Parts of it were excavated. There was just way too much to excavate all of it, of course. This is looking down into the crater. The entry was actually a tunnel that went through the very thick wall that you see here with a keep or a central tower. There was other towers along here, four towers. His palace was down here, complete with a bath, bathing facility. And I'm not just talking about a bathtub. This is like a Turkish bath, or like several saunas. The hot room, the tepid room, the cold room, all of that and every one of his palaces had those, by the way. This is another picture of that inner area, the courtyard going around here. This was the bath area, the tower, the main entryway here, which is a tunnel. And if you go through that tunnel and go down the hill a little bit, you can see the base of what people think is the monument that marks Herod the Great's tomb. This man over here, Ehud Netzer, he recently passed away when part of the hillside fell down on top of him. Yeah, he was killed that way at his archaeological site. Ehud Netzer is Mr. Herod. He's excavated 3 major palaces of Herod, including the largest one of them all at Jericho, where Herod spent his winters, because Jericho is so low, right? It was quite warm. But you can see the very nicely cut stones here. The original thing probably looked something like this right here as archaeological architects reconstructed. They also found many pieces of a reddish limestone, a very special kind of stone, highly polished with decorations like this. And Ehud Netzer thinks that is Herod's sarcophagus or his coffin. Okay, it may have belonged to Herod. It doesn't have his name on it, so we don't know for sure, unfortunately. The next place I want to talk about is perhaps the crowning achievement of Herod the Great. That is the city of Caesarea. He named it after his friend Caesar Augustus. It originally was just a small fishing village, not worth very much at all. When Herod came to it, he transformed it into one of the great flowers of the Roman Empire. In fact, I have to say that the harbor he built, and it's not this one, this is the Crusader and modern harbor. Herod's harbor was the largest harbor in the Roman Empire at that time, and we will see its remains in a later picture. I have to tell a story about wintertime, which this is, when the sun is setting a little bit south of west right there. That picture is taken from right here along this. You can see the pillars and pillar bases and so on that have washed into the sea. But after a major storm, I remember going there with my wife and son, and just walking along the sand of the beach, you could pick up ancient coins. Because the storm had disrupted things and washed things onto the beach. This map right here, when I first visited Caesarea, there had been only one very small excavation in the 1950s. That was located about here somewhere. They wanted to excavate Herod's wall going around here. In 2008, my family visited Caesarea, and you'll see a difference in a couple of slides there. It has been massively excavated, and hundreds of things have been excavated there now, and we know a lot about it. You see, well, here was the Crusader city, fortress, right here. Herod's city wall goes around like this. A few centuries later, they extended the city, the Byzantine city wall, dating to about 500 AD. Herod's hippodrome was right along here, and we'll see that later. But in the Byzantine times, here was the hippodrome. There were two aqueducts that brought water into the city. The original one built by Herod is this low-level aqueduct, but there was an upper-level aqueduct which brought in much more water later on. I'm going to go on here. This is a picture of that same area. If you look at this map, the picture is taken from about here and looking north. So here is the theater, which in the previous picture was right here, outside Herod's walls, but inside the Byzantine one. Okay, so that's right there. Theater and a small intimate theater called an Odeon. His palace, Herod's palace, unexcavated when this picture was taken, was in this location right here. It's called the Promontory Palace. What will become Herod's hippodrome was right here, where number 11 is. Number 5 was the Crusader fortress. 9 is the Herod's wall. 6 are the two aqueducts. This is the high-level aqueduct right here, the low-level aqueduct coming in there. There was a series of villas right along here, high-class houses with very nice wall decorations and floor mosaics and so on, where number 7 is. Number 10, there was a Mithraeum. I'm going to describe what a Mithraeum is in a little bit, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's a place of Roman soldiers. This is in 2008. Look at the difference. It's almost completely excavated. The government of Israel has invested millions of dollars into exposing Caesarea for a major tourist attraction. You can see the theater right here, the Odeon. The road that goes into the site goes along right here. But you can see the villas, that were found here, just all of them in a row. You can see the massive hippodrome right here, okay? You can sit on these seats and have a marvelous view as the chariot races were going around you. You have a marvelous view of the Mediterranean Sea sitting there. These are the walls of the Crusader fortress, and inside, Herod had built a temple of white marble to Caesar Augustus. And that's where this letter H is. Unfortunately, the temple has been almost completely destroyed, but they've gathered all the white marble together and are beginning to reconstruct what that temple looked like just from the remains of that white marble. This is one of the breakwaters of the modern harbor that is there. This is Herod's palace. Right here, and going onto the breakwater. You can't see it very well, but there was actually a swimming pool right out there. Yeah, this is the swimming pool associated with Herod's palace, which looked like this on the promontory. It was itself a breakwater at the time. These are the two aqueducts that brought water into the town. The upper aqueduct, the low-level aqueduct right here. The city itself is down here. That's the promontory palace right there, the Crusader fortress there. Wouldn't you like to go on a dig to Caesarea? It's right there on the sands of the Mediterranean. You know, you just put your bathing suit on and go out. Of course, you're dead tired after a day of working on an archaeological dig, too. So, yeah. An aerial view of the theater. The Israelis have reconstructed it so that they have a festival there once a year. And lots of people come and hear singers and see dancers and plays and things like that. The wall that went around Herod's city right there. Now, the harbor. I said earlier this was the largest harbor in the Roman Empire, even larger than that at Ostia, which was the site of the Roman harbor itself. This is the modern one coming out here, okay? That's this. The breakwater comes out, this, and then this. And we are looking at this and this right here. There was also a Crusader harbor that was even smaller than the modern one. Herod's harbor was all of this. The entry here, all this. It was 8 times the size of the modern harbor. It was huge. Herod also used, to make that breakwater, he used a recent Roman invention of how to harden cement underwater. Okay, that was an important discovery and one that Herod used. Herod must have invested billions in all these constructions. But there was something else found at Caesarea. It's not Herod's, but I have to explain it to you because it's a lot of fun. It's a Roman inscription. It's written in Latin. How's your Latin? It's made up of 3 lines preserved, and the top line has the name Tiberiaeum in it, Tiberius. And it begins here. Here's a T, okay, T, an I, a B, do you see it there? E, R, I, E, U, shaped like a V, M, Tiberiaeum. That's Tiberius. Okay, the emperor Tiberius. What happened during the reign of Emperor Tiberius? He's the one who instituted the tax. Okay? But also, he was the emperor at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. And that's what's more important in this inscription, because we have, do you see the bottom corner of an N? Then a T, I, U, S, the last letters of Pontius, and then Pilatus. So Pontius Pilate is mentioned on this inscription here at Caesarea. And then the last line gives us Pilate's title. He was the prefect of Judea. And indeed, that's exactly the term that is used of Pontius Pilate in the Gospels. He was the prefect of Judea. So we actually have an inscription that talks about a biblical figure. That's kind of rare. But to have a Pontius Pilate too, and to have the same title as he actually had, is very interesting indeed. We're going to spend the last bit of time on Jerusalem. We're going to see some amazing things here. First of all, a little bit about how Jerusalem grew as a city. We talk about the city of David, we archaeologists. That was this little narrow sliver of a ridge going down here, right here, city of David. I don't know if you can see that very clearly there, but it's a ridge. Why did they build a city on a ridge? The highest ground was up here, where the temple would later be built. Why did they build it down lower than the upper part of the hill here? Water, boing, right there. The spring of Gihon, and we'll see more of that a little bit. So this was the city of the Jebusites, conquered by David, okay? And then he built his administrative center up here in what is called Ophel, and then Solomon built the temple up here, right about where the Dome of the Rock sits today. And we'll see that in a later picture. During the time of Hezekiah, after the destruction, when Samaria was destroyed, the northern kingdom of North Israel was destroyed, there were lots of refugees that fled down to Judah from Israel. You can imagine, thousands of them. And they settled here west of the city of David, on a higher hill, actually, an area that the Bible calls the Mishneh. Now, if you've studied much Jewish history at all of their literature, you know that part of the Talmud is called the Mishnah, the second law. And that's what this is. This is the second city. The city of David was the first one. This then was, and this was a large refugee city, part of the city quarter was called Mishnah. The wall around it was built by King Hezekiah. All around, and there was a pool here. Hezekiah actually brought the water from Gihon Spring under the city of David and out here. If you've ever been to Jerusalem, maybe you've walked through that tunnel. It's often called Hezekiah's tunnel or the Siloam tunnel. But anyway, Herod built his palace right here with 3 towers, monumental towers, marking the spot. But that's not the important part. The important part was his rebuilding of the temple on a massive, massive scale. At the time of Herod, this was the largest temple in the Roman Empire. It would only be superseded in 135 AD when Hadrian built the great temple of Jupiter in Baalbek in Lebanon today. A huge complex there in Lebanon. But Herod built this temple. This is the temple that Jesus and the disciples saw. So we're going to spend a little time with what has been discovered about that temple. What did Jesus and the disciples see? And there's some interesting things that go on there. Okay, looking now down at the modern photograph of the temple compound, Herod's compound. You can see the walls still today going around like this, just right down there. Not this, that was outside the walls. The temple compound was like this, and then along here. This is a Muslim cemetery right here. Across the road is a Jewish cemetery. This is the lower slopes of the Mount of Olives. All these are olive trees along there. But this temple complex was built by Herod to hold about 100,000 Jewish pilgrims, like when they went for Passover or the feast days, those kinds of things. thousands of Jews would come from all over. And you remember who carried the cross for Christ? A man from Cyrene, which is North Africa, Libya today. So Jews came from all over the Roman Empire to go to the temple. Now, the temple wasn't this building, of course. That's the Dome of the Rock, built around 700 AD by Muslims to mark the spot where Muhammad is said to have risen to heaven for a short period of time. This is the Aqsa Mosque, the third most holy mosque in all of Islam after Mecca and then Medina. Jerusalem is very holy to Muslims, if I can put it that way. This is the Muslim quarter over here, the Jewish quarter over here. Above that, Armenian and Christian quarters. Outside, these are all archaeological excavations along the temple compound here, most of them dating to the time AD times. The Wailing Wall is right here. It's on the western side of the wall around the temple, and it uses Herodian stones for that. Okay. See if I can get this to go ahead. All right. These drawings, architectural drawings, reconstructions, are made by an archaeological architect who has spent over 40 years examining these elements. I'm going to show you a picture of a book he's written with hundreds of illustrations, and these illustrations come from that book. Okay. This is what the Temple of Jerusalem looked like when Jesus and his disciples went there. How would they go there? What would they do? I'm going to give you some illustrations. They would have entered right here. They would have gone up these big, broad, monumental stairs. But before they went up those stairs, you know what they would do? They would go into one of these little rooms here, here, where there were pools of water called mikvahs. Right here, the word mikveh, or a gathering of water. And they would sort of, can I use a word, baptize themselves? They would dunk themselves into the water, thereby becoming ritually clean. And they had to be ritually clean to go into the presence of God. Okay? And so, first of all, they would dunk themselves into the water, become ritually clean. Then they would go up these large stairs right here, enter the double gate, go under the royal stoa here, which may have been the place where Jesus cleared out the temple, the money changers. Okay, this was a huge monument. Josephus spends a long time describing this royal stoa right here. It was the wonder of the temple, actually. The high place on the temple where the devil took Jesus may have been this corner right here, and then said, jump off. Tried to get Jesus to jump and trust the angels. But if you entered this temple, you went under the royal stoa and came up in the court of the women right here. Okay, this would be the court of the women, court of the men, court of the priests, and then only a few priests going into the temple itself. The area around here, where the colonnade goes all around, was, if you were a Gentile, and most of us would have been back then, that's where we could go. We couldn't go farther. There were inscriptions all along talking about banning Gentiles from going into the temple further. This over here is a Roman fortress where Roman soldiers stood, were garrisoned in case problems occurred at the temple. And there could be problems during those feast days. Then if you offered your prayers, maybe a sacrifice, a dove or something, you would go down this stairway under the royal stoa again, and emerge here at the triple gate. Okay, this was the exit. This here and this here. Okay. That was how you went out, and then you went and did your business. You could go out one of these monumental stairways too, at the southeastern part of the compound or the southwestern part of the compound. The Golden Gate was this one right here that actually entered the temple courts up there. the Pool of Bethesda, just here, where there's that glorious Crusader church, Queen St. Anne's church, built by the Crusaders. It's a beautiful church. Okay, now we look at it from the other side, the southwest side. And this is an important side because I'm going to show you an important slide because I'm going to show you several pictures of this corner right here. Note the stairway coming down both sides. Mikvahs over here, okay? Shops or mikvahs all along here as well. This high road connects the temple with Herod's palace on the western side of the city. If there were troubles, Herod could go quickly to the temple itself. Now, Herod was half Jewish, right? He was half Edomite also, or Idumean, as the term was back then. But he knew how to worship in the temple, being half Jewish. I think his mother was Jewish. And this arch here will become important to archaeologists, as will this arch here. And I'm going to show pictures of both these arches along here. Also, the stones along here we're going to look at in considerable detail. I have to tell you a story about the fortress Antonia here. When Paul brought his friends to the temple, remember he was charged with bringing Gentiles into the temple, and they were going to kill him, right? He ran into the temple area and went up some stairs to the gate of the fortress Antonia and claimed Roman citizenship, right? And he was a Roman citizen, and they protected him. Otherwise, he would have been killed for bringing these Gentiles into the temple. So that's where all of that happened. Okay, I told you about that arch I was going to show you. This was the arch along here's the corner we're going to look at in several pictures. This is called Robinson's Arch. Look how wide it is there. You can see the Springer stones going up and out. Before the excavations that it went way down here, this is all that was visible. Okay. It was a man named Robinson who saw this and said, oh, I bet that's an arch connected with Herod's temple. You can see Herod's stones in the temple. There are all these beautiful stones here marked with bosses. We'll see later on what a boss is. A boss is these, do you see lines going across the top and bottom of the stones? Those are called bosses. Actually, the boss is what sticks out in the middle. This arch went out and down to this support right here. And then there was another one that went over here. These are the stairways then that went, that were on the corners of the temple compound. This is that arch. All this is Herodian right here. This is the arch that is underneath the roadway that went to Herod's palace in the western part of the city. Okay. This is the monumental staircase that they would have gone up and entered. Well, you can't see the double entry. It's behind this corner of a wall extension. But you can see the filled in 3 arches, if you look real closely right there, of the exit. You can also see the mikvahs, at least the places for the pools next to the stairways. Here you can see some of the pools that go down where they would do their ritual ablutions. Other walls that are on top of all of this are Byzantine in date. But Herod's stones, you see these going along here? You see the difference with this line with the stones here? That's Herod, that's not Herod. There have been about 4 different reconstructions of these walls through time, including the Crusaders and others. An Ottoman Turkish sultan who was the last one. If you were to go inside the entrance to the temple, go underground, you would have gone through this. All this is Herodian right here, including the decorative domes that go above it. The decorative domes looked something like this over here. The same with the exit underground. I should go back to this one right here and say that most tourists cannot visit this place because it's under the very holy Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they don't want terrorists to put bombs in the area and destroy their mosque. But we were able to go down there as an archaeological group. Okay, I was the annual professor at an archaeological institute in Jerusalem for a year. And so we arranged for this tour by people who operate the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So that was an okay thing for us to do. I told you I was going to show you a picture of a book that has all this. If you're interested in temple things, this book is for you. Lean Rittmeyer is the archaeological architect who has studied this stuff for 40 years, the excavations, and has the best illustrations of what Herod's temple looked like. Also, is there anything left of Solomon's temple? No, really, but you can see maybe where it might have been in certain ways. And this guy milks every thing he can out of it. At the Israel Museum, they have a reconstruction of Jerusalem during the time of Jesus. They don't call it during the time of Jesus. They're Jewish, right? They say the Second Temple, the time of the Second Temple. That's their term for this Herodian period. Our term would be the time of Jesus. You can see the Pool of Bethesda right down here in two parts. The Fortress Antonia, the wall road going down to the temple from the palace. Here are the towers of Herod's palace, one of them named after his wife, Mariamne. A theater, most of this is reconstructed out of the imagination of architects. But the temple is reasonably well done based on Rittmeyer's work. The courtyards, here's where you would come up after going under the stoa, a royal stoa. Here's where you would go down. The temple of the men, temple of the priests, and then the temple building itself. Gentiles could go behind this area, not come out into the courts. Okay, this was the Golden Gate right there. There were several inscriptions along that colonnade where the Gentiles could go. I show you this picture. It's only part of the inscription. But the whole inscription is known because many parts of it have been found. So they know what it all was. Listen to what it said. No foreigner, Gentile, may enter within the railing and enclosure that surround the temple. Anyone apprehended shall have himself to blame for his consequent death. Reminds one of the story of Paul's experience, right? So they were very serious about this. The inscription is written in Greek. Greek? Why Greek? Why not Latin? Well, Latin was newfangled. The whole Mediterranean was basically still Greek-speaking. That's why the New Testament is written in Greek. And Pastor Kevin had to suffer through that, I'm sure. Although maybe you had fun with it. I don't know. I did. But it's written in all capital letters because that's how they wrote back then. Some pictures of what the temple building itself may have looked like into the temple of the men, temple of the priests, the court of the men, court of the priests behind. These two columns in front were probably there to depict for Israelites who could not go into the temple the glories of the temple that lay within. You can see other gold features here. All these described by Josephus in his History of the Jews, a massive book that Josephus wrote in Rome after he had been taken captive by the Romans. Josephus was a general in the Jewish army in their revolt against Rome, 66 to 70 A.D. Okay. Now we're going to return to this corner, this southwest corner right here. The road going along it, maybe mikvahs or shops along here. This is the Robinson's Arch coming out right here. The arch went down to this and over to another one, and then like that, a stairway that came down. Okay, and then a broad street going along north-south along the temple and along the south wall of the temple. Okay, we're going to spend a little bit of time right there. I want to read a text from Mark here. The disciples are acting like tourists. And as he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, wow, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." And this guy is really impressed, right? This is like going to the Seattle Center and seeing that we did yesterday, the Chihuli's glass stuff. Gorgeous, yeah? You react that way. Wow, look at these things. I wonder how he did it. All of that. Well, the disciples were acting that way too. If they had had cell phones, they would have had them all out, taking selfies in front of maybe this corner right here because of this. Denise, my wife, standing here at the corner, okay? These are the Herodian courses going up like this, up to there, all right? She's standing at the corner. My son is standing at the other end of a single stone. Up above them are a stone that is this wide, going like this. That's this stone right here. I was with an archaeological group when this picture was taken in 1972. But this is the corner right here. You see the bosses like this. But this stone goes, this is just a crack. Another crack goes all the way over to here. Then I have another width of a stone. These are cornerstones. Then another very long stone. Okay, these are the cornerstones. They alternate like that. Here's a long one. Here's the short one. Here's another long one, short one, another long one, and so on. All the way up like that. These are huge stones. They weighed about 50 tons. They were 40 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 3 feet thick. This is not a small stone. How did they quarry them? How did they move them? We think we figured that out. In the quarries, and people have been quarrying for thousands of years, right? So this is the tried and true way, I guess. They would pick out down narrow places down to the bottom of what they wanted, okay? Then they would fill it with timber and they would pour water over the wood. Now, what happens to wood when water gets in it? It expands. And apparently, it could expand enough to initiate a crack in the bottom. And then they could begin to lever things out like that. Okay, so that's how they could get the rocks cut. How did they move them? Probably something like this. Here this fellow is making the rock very smooth and nice. Then they would come along and using a type of lift. You're going to see it. It's like having a gerbil in a cage. But they would lift the stones up onto a log, and then they would put other logs underneath. Hook it up to maybe oxen, maybe just a lot of people, and begin to pull. And as they pulled, they would take lumber, wood that came out the back and run it around to the front. And they would just keep going along like that until they got to the Temple Mount itself. This quarry, we know where the quarry was based on the chemical makeup of the limestone. It was about a kilometer away, 2/3 of a mile, 0.6 of a mile away. And everything from the quarry down to the temple was level or downhill. Nice. They didn't have to haul this uphill. Okay, here's one of these lifts with my son at the top. You'd get inside the cage, you'd begin to move, and through the use of pulleys and other things, you could slowly lift this. My son and I got in here, and we had to go around. Well, we had to make the wheel go around 2 times before it would pull up that much. That's how much the pulleys helped. But that's probably how they lifted the stones. Then, as they were carrying the stones or moving the stones along the wood, the quarry was somewhere over here. Go to that stained glass window. That's about where the quarries were relative to this picture. But they could take it down and they could cross right here. Do you see? They're on the same level. And they could go down and they would lay their course of stones like this all along here. Then the next time they would cross here and do another one on top, raising the ground in between at the same time. Okay? So again, they weren't lifting these things up. They were just lifting them up enough to get them off those rollers there, using another one of these gerbil cages to do that. So that's probably how they did it. They went way up with it. But those walls were impressive, and that's why the disciples reacted the way they did. And you remember what Jesus said. What did he say? Hey, you see these great stones? There won't be left one upon another. Well, I'm here to tell you there still are stones left standing. Was Jesus just wrong? Well, who destroyed all of this? The Romans did. How do you destroy things? You start from the top, right? And you knock the stones. This is from the Roman destruction. You knock the stones off from the top. It would gradually fill up along what's there. And these are the original Herodian stones. That's that corner again. Here are the steps of the road going down. It's that corner. And all these stones right here are all from the Roman destruction. Gradually, they would lever these things off and knock them down so that gradually they built up outside the wall, right? Well, you don't go down underneath and try to get the stones that are underneath the destruction. No, you stop at the upper part of the destruction level. So there wasn't another stone left on another that was visible anyway. But for archaeologists, well, we mess things up sometimes. On our last picture, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, AD 70, took place long after Herod's death, of course, but there were still other Herods who were ruling other parts of Palestine. When the general Titus, who was the son of the earlier general of the fight against the Jews, Vespasian had ultimately become emperor of Rome, so he left his son Titus in charge of the war against the Jews. When Titus, therefore, was successful, after every major battle that the Romans fought, they brought things back to Rome and had this massive triumphant parade through Rome, right? And so Titus built this arch right here, had a big parade through Rome. And if you ever visit the Colosseum in Rome, turn around and you'll see the Arch of Titus behind you. If I took this picture 1968, that was a European tour I took. And guess who was on that tour? Carla, you're listening, I know. Carla Walters was on that same tour, an English literary tour in 1968. She remembers me for going down to the Roman Forum, which you see behind here, and spending a whole day there and being so excited. Yeah, I was all by myself down there, but boy, it was fun discovering the Roman Forum and everything that was in it. On this area of the Arch of Titus, just above where you would say, if you were standing here, you'd come about this high, okay? But looking up at this area right here of the arch, you see a scene of the parade of the Romans going through Jerusalem, carrying the wealth of the temple. Okay, do you see this right here, right? The menorah or the candlestick from the temple. You see the trumpets that they would have played to announce sunset on Friday or feast days or whatever like that. You see the table of showbread behind here, the standard of the Roman Empire right there as they're parading by. So he was exalting the victory over the Jews in Jerusalem by carrying back the temple furnishings from that destruction. Herod must have taxed the Jews incredibly. He must have really oppressed them to do that. But he built some amazing things that have come down to us, still lasting today. And I have shown you only about half of them. There's much more. The Cave of Machpelah monument is his. There's a massive temple in Samaria that he dedicated to Augustus again. And other palaces whose remains are not quite as marvelous as Masada, Machaerus, and Herodium that we saw earlier. But still, he was an incredible person, and we have him to thank for all these finds that are still around. Yeah, that's it. Is there time for questions? Okay, yeah, I guess those of you who are watching, write down your questions, and on Sabbath afternoon, after the lecture then, we can have some of those questions. Although Sabbath afternoon's lecture is pretty extensive as well. The ones tomorrow morning are shorter. Dana? Okay. What was the time frame of all these buildings and who did all the work? All right. The time frame, Herod began in the 40s, BC, okay, and lasted up until 4 or 3 BC when he passed away. That's about the time Jesus was born, right? So he died very soon after that. He built through other people, of course, probably slaves that he had taken from wherever, or just gathered people forcibly from villages and so on to do all of this, which is probably how they built the pyramids and all in Egypt and all of that. So that's maybe who built all these things. There had to be architects from Rome because the style of the buildings are all Roman in style. Herod's descendants lasted until about the 70s AD as well in Galilee and also in Transjordan, Machaerus. But one of the Herods was in Galilee, another one in Caesarea as well. So his children were prominent in that. Yeah. Yes? Gumi, can we get the original photo that, or maybe this one. This is good to show you all of this. The question is, there were 3 levels of palace here at Masada. How did they get from one to the other? We don't know exactly how they would have done it in the ancient time because erosion happens, okay? Right now, if you're a tourist and have the time and the energy, because it gets hot there in Masada, you go down here, you see where the stairway goes down. Well, you can visit this one at the top easily. Then you go down the stairway and go along the path here, and that brings you to the middle one. The stairway continues down to the lower level right here. And in fact, if you've really got a lot of energy, there's another path that goes way down like this. Here it is, right here, that goes to those quarries. Goes along here, and the quarries were down, not the quarries, the cisterns where they collected the water. So if you really have a lot of energy, you can do that. It's easier to come up the rampart or the ramp over here and then get the trail that way. But usually the way people visit Masada is you come up in the gondola right about here where these buildings are. right here. The way to go is you go along the walls like this. You visit the pool. You come up. There's a synagogue I think that's the synagogue right there. You visit the palaces, lower palaces here and here if you want. And then you visit this upper palace. You go down to these, and then you have to walk back up. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the gondola right here. That's where you enter, right there. You can see the gondola cable going down right here. The snake trap path, if you're really energetic and youthful and despise taking artificial ways up, you can go up the snake path right here and come up at the same place. So yeah, that's where the gondola comes up. We don't know how they got it. They probably had something like the snake. Josephus talks about the snake path. Yeah. You know, they do get rain here, and it can be really hard. That's how they fill those cisterns that are down at the bottom. But, yeah, but still, the rain is rare, and so erosion doesn't occur very much. This is limestone. It can erode. Limestone, calcium dissolves in water. Yeah, that's why caves are in limestone. Yes. Did anyone live in the palaces while Herod was gone? You know how to stump me. I can't answer that one. Josephus doesn't tell us anything about that. When the Jews were rebelling against the Romans, they lived there, I'm sure. When archaeologists were digging this area of the storerooms, they came across olives, still olives, not just pits. Olive stuff. It's so dry. The part of the olives, the part that you eat, it was still there. In fact, it wasn't at Masada, but at the site of Ein Gedi, farther north, they found some seeds, and they planted those seeds. And lo and behold, it was a plant that had gone extinct. It was the very rare balsam oil that whichever Mary it was, used to anoint Jesus' feet. Okay? Horribly expensive in the ancient world, but that plant has gone extinct between then and now. But those seeds germinated, and we have that plant now, of all things. Yeah, that's sort of like stem cell research. Okay. Pastor Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Herr. It's really nice to see this again. I was at Masada 2 springs ago, and it's nice to walk through this and hear all the details, so thank you so much. A little advertisement for tomorrow for those watching online and for you in attendance here today. The way that it's going to pick up again tomorrow starts at 9:30 a.m., and the title of that talk will be The Archaeology of Solomon. Then we'll have our worship service, and Dr. Herr is going to walk through, an archaeologist goes through Psalm 23. So that's during our worship service time. Then we'll have our potluck. So if you're watching at home, come tomorrow for church, join us for potluck, and following potluck, we'll have our final presentation, which has the provocative title, Did God Have a Wife? So join us for all of that, and we'll have the most extensive time for Q&A following that last presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Herr. Let's have a prayer, and we'll close the Sabbath here together. Dear God in heaven, we are thankful for the opportunity to learn, to dig under the rocks and explore what it was like hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. And the ultimate purpose of why we do that is we want to walk in the footsteps of Christ. We want to go back and understand the significance of the message that we have in the Bible. So help us to do that humbly together, to remain curious, and above all, to seek you first. Be with us now, and we pray this, Jesus, in your name. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for showing up tonight, and please come again tomorrow.